All right, so should a product manager learn to code? It's a question I think we've all wrestled with at some point, right?
Oh, yeah. Definitely a common one. And today we're going to do a deep dive on this topic.
Yeah, and our source material for today is a blog post from Algo Academy.
Uh-huh.
Now, if you don't know Algo Academy, they're a site that helps people prep for coding interviews.
Mm-hmm.
So they might lean a certain way in the should you learn to code debate,
Right.
but we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what they have to say.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah. But listen, whether you're thinking about becoming a coding guru or not, this deep dive is going to give you the insights you need to decide what's right for your career, no matter where you land on this whole coding thing.
What I found really interesting about the article is they don't just come out and say, everybody needs to learn to code.
Right.
They actually lay out some pretty compelling arguments on both sides, which is way more helpful than just a simple yes or no answer.
I agree, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack in this deep dive. We're going to look at the arguments for and against product managers learning to code.
Awesome.
So let's kick things off with the pro-coding side.
Okay, sounds good.
One of the first things the article talks about is this idea of improved communication with developers.
Right.
And I think this is something we can all relate to, right? Like, how many times have we felt lost in translation when talking to our tech team?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
But how does knowing how to code actually help us bridge that gap?
So imagine you're trying to explain a new feature to a developer, and instead of just talking about it in general terms, you can actually reference the specific type of code that would be involved.
Oh, interesting.
You can even sketch out a basic code flow right there on the whiteboard.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
starting to see how that would be helpful.
That level of understanding builds so much trust with your tech team.
Right, because you're speaking their language.
Exactly. It's like you're not just throwing ideas over the fence anymore. You're actually getting down in the trenches with them.
I like that analogy.
It also helps avoid those frustrating lost in translation moments that can happen when you're not quite on the same page technically.
Right, because you're not just saying, I want a button that does X. You're saying, I'm picturing this button triggering a specific API call.
Exactly. And when you're able to talk about those technical details, it just makes the whole collaboration process so much smoother.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
And it goes beyond just talking the talk,
Okay, how so?
Think about all those times you've had to make tough decisions as a product manager.
Oh, yeah. There are plenty of those.
Right. Like which features to prioritize or how to approach a tricky technical challenge.
Exactly.
Having some coding knowledge allows you to weigh the pros and cons of different solutions from a technical perspective.
So you're not just thinking about the user needs, you're also thinking about the impact on the code base.
Precisely. You're able to consider both sides of the coin, which ultimately leads to better product decisions.
That's got to boost your credibility with the dev team, too.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
Because you're not just the ideas person anymore.
Yeah.
You're showing them that you understand the technical implications of those ideas.
It's about earning their respect and building a collaborative environment where everyone feels heard and understood.
I love that. And I think that's a really important point. It's not about becoming a coding superstar just to show off.
Right.
It's about using your knowledge to build better products and stronger relationships with your team.
Exactly.
Now, the article also talks about being able to create prototypes and MVPs yourself.
Oh, okay.
I'll admit, this is where I start to get a little nervous. I mean, I'm no developer.
Sure.
So how realistic is it for a PM to actually build stuff?
Well, with all these no-code and low-code platforms popping up, it's becoming way more attainable than you might think.
Okay, interesting.
These tools allow you to create functional prototypes and even basic MVPs without having to write complex code from scratch.
So you're saying I don't need to be a coding whiz to build something?
Not at all. There are tons of resources available that make it super easy for anyone to get started.
That sounds way less intimidating.
And the real benefit is that you can quickly test out your ideas and get user feedback without having to wait for the dev team to build something from scratch.
Okay, so it's all about speed and agility.
Exactly. And that can be a game changer for innovation.
Because you can validate your ideas faster and iterate more quickly.
Precisely. And it's not about replacing developers or anything like that. It's about empowering product managers to experiment and bring their ideas to life more quickly.
I see. So it's like another tool in your PM toolkit.
Exactly.
Now, the article also mentions this concept of technical debt.
Uh-huh.
And I think this is something that can sound really scary to non-technical folks.
All right.
But the article does a great job of explaining it in a way that's easy to understand.
Yeah. They use a really good analogy.
What's the analogy?
They compare it to building a house. And to save time, you decide to skip putting in proper insulation.
Oh, I see where this is going.
You might save some money up front, but in the long run, you'll end up paying the price with higher energy bills and all sorts of potential problems.
Right, because those shortcuts come back to bite you.
Exactly. And in software development, technical debt refers to those shortcuts and quick fixes that might work in the short term but can cause major headaches down the line.
So it's like those Band-Aid solutions that we all know are not really solutions.
Exactly. And the problem is that these shortcuts can accumulate over time and eventually lead to a code base that's difficult to maintain, update, and scale.
So it's like that Jenga tower that gets more and more wobbly with every block you pull out.
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so how does understanding technical debt help a product manager who might not even be writing the code?
It helps you make more informed decisions about the trade-offs involved in building a product.
Okay, I see.
For example, you might be tempted to rush a feature to market.
Right.
But if you understand the potential technical debt it might create, you can have a more balanced conversation with the team about timelines and priorities.
So you're not just thinking about what can we build, you're also thinking about how should we build it?
Yeah.
And what are the long-term consequences of our decisions?
Exactly. And that kind of strategic thinking is invaluable for any product manager, regardless of their coding skills.
Absolutely.
It's about seeing the bigger picture and understanding how all the pieces fit together.
And that's what makes a great product manager. Right.
Absolutely.
So, okay, we've heard a lot about the benefits of learning to code for product managers.
Yeah.
But let's be real for a second.
Okay.
We're product managers, not software engineers.
Right.
We've got roadmaps to build, user research to conduct, stakeholders to manage. Is learning to code really the best use of our precious time?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what we're going to explore in the next part of this deep dive.
All right, I'm intrigued. Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back after a short break.
Sounds good.
So we've made a pretty good case, I think, for learning to code.
Yeah.
But, you know, the flip side is we are product managers.
That's true.
That's software engineers.
Right.
We have a lot on our plates already.
We
I
do.
mean, we got roadmaps to build, user research to do, stakeholders to keep happy.
Yeah.
So is learning to code really the best use of our time?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
And that's what the article dives into next.
Okay.
It lays out some of the arguments against product managers learning to code.
All right. Let's hear them.
And it's not to say that coding is bad or anything like that.
Right.
It just acknowledges that there are some potential pitfalls and, opportunity costs to consider.
Yeah, definitely makes sense.
So one of the first things they bring up is this risk of falling into the micromanagement trap.
Ooh, that sounds scary.
It can be, so let me paint you a picture.
Okay.
Imagine you're in a technical design meeting,
Uh-huh.
and because you have some coding knowledge, you start dictating specific solutions to the developers.
Oh, no.
Not only can this stifle their creativity and problem solving,
Right.
but it can also send a message that you don't trust their expertise.
Yeah, that's not going to end well.
No, it's not a recipe for a happy or productive team.
So it's kind of like, you know that saying, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's tempting to use your newfound coding knowledge to try to control every detail.
Right, right.
But that's actually the opposite of what we want to do as product managers.
We want to empower our teams, not micromanage them.
Exactly. So the key is finding that balance between having enough technical knowledge to be dangerous in a good way,
In a good way.
but not so much that you start overstepping your boundaries and getting into the weeds of implementation.
So how do we know where to draw that line?
Well, the article talks about this concept of technical literacy as being the sweet spot for product managers.
Okay, technical literacy. What exactly does that mean?
It's about having a solid understanding of the technical landscape without needing to write code yourself.
So it's kind of like you don't need to be a master chef to appreciate a good meal.
I like that analogy.
You know, you just need to know enough to understand the ingredients and how they work together.
Exactly. It's about being able to have informed conversations with your tech team,
Right.
understanding the implications of technical decisions,
Huh.
and spotting potential red flags before they turn into major problems.
Okay, so how do we actually develop this technical literacy? Do we need to go back to school and get a computer science degree?
Not necessarily. The article offers some really practical tips for how you can start building your technical knowledge without having to become a full-blown developer.
Okay, awesome. I'm all ears.
So one of the first suggestions they make is to start with understanding system architecture.
Okay, system architecture. That sounds kind of intimidating.
I know it can sound a little scary at first, but think of it like this.
Okay.
You're at a construction site, and you need to communicate with the architects, the engineers, and the contractors.
Okay. I can picture that.
You don't need to be a master builder yourself,
No.
but you need to understand the blueprints, the terminology, and the overall process.
So it's about being able to speak the language of construction, even if you're not the one swinging the hammer.
Exactly. And in the world of software development system, architecture is like the blueprint for your product.
So it tells you how all the different pieces fit together and how they interact with each other?
Exactly. So for example, let's say you're working on a social media app.
Okay.
Understanding whether it's built on a monolithic architecture or a microservices architecture can have a huge impact on things like scalability, maintainability, and the speed of feature development.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about it like that.
It can really make or break your product in the long run.
So, okay, I'm convinced I need to learn more about system architecture, but how do I even begin to grasp these concepts?
Well, luckily, there are tons of great resources out there.
Okay.
One of the best ways to learn is by doing.
By doing.
So one suggestion they have is to participate in code reviews as an observer.
So basically just sit in and listen while the developers are going through the code.
Exactly. It's a chance to see how they think, how they approach problems, and how they communicate with each other.
Oh, interesting.
Plus, you'll start to pick up on common patterns and best practices.
I like that. It's like an immersive language course, but for code.
Exactly. And you don't even have to say a word. Just sit back, listen, and absorb.
Are there any other hands-on learning opportunities like that?
Yeah, for sure. They also recommend attending technical design discussions and asking clarifying questions.
Okay, so this is my chance to actually get involved in the decision-making process.
Exactly. You can learn a lot by listening to how the technical team weighs different options and makes trade-offs.
And by asking questions, I can make sure I really understand the rationale behind those decisions.
Absolutely. And the developers will appreciate your curiosity and willingness to learn.
Anything else?
Another suggestion is to shadow a developer while they're working on a specific task or debugging a problem.
Oh, that sounds cool.
It's like getting a behind-the-scenes tour of the code base.
And I can ask questions along the way to really understand how things work under the hood.
Exactly. You'd be surprised how much you can learn just by watching and asking questions.
Okay, so we've got code reviews, design discussions, and developer shadowing. What about resources for staying up to date on the ever-changing world of technology?
Another great question. The article has some good recommendations for that too.
Okay, great, because it feels like there's something new every day in this industry.
It really does. So they suggest checking out engineering blogs from leading tech companies like Google, Netflix, and Amazon.
Okay, I've seen some of those. They're pretty insightful.
They often publish articles about their technical challenges and solutions, and they're written in a way that's accessible even to non-engineers.
Yeah, I've noticed that. It's amazing to get a glimpse into how these companies are pushing the boundaries of technology.
Definitely gives you some food for thought.
And it helps me think more strategically about the future of our own products.
Exactly. So reading those blogs can be a great way to stay on top of industry trends and see how other companies are solving problems.
Any other resources?
They also recommend diving into the documentation for popular frameworks and tools that are relevant to your industry.
Oh, okay, the documentation.
I know it might sound a little dry,
It kind of does.
but it's actually a goldmine of information about how things work and the best practices for using them.
Right, because even if we're not writing the code ourselves, we need to understand the capabilities and limitations of the tools that our developers are using.
Exactly. And the more you expose yourself to these technical resources, the more comfortable you'll become with the language and concepts.
Okay, I'm starting to feel a lot more confident about this whole technical literacy thing.
That's great.
It's not about becoming a coding whiz overnight,
Right.
but about taking a proactive approach to learning and expanding our knowledge base.
Exactly. And you can always start small and gradually build from there.
Now, you mentioned earlier these no-code and low-code platforms that are making it easier for non-developers to build things.
Oh, yeah. Those are game changers.
Can you tell us a bit more about those?
Yeah, so think of these platforms like building blocks for digital products.
Okay.
Instead of writing lines of code, you can drag and drop pre-built components and connect them together to create functional apps and websites.
So it's kind of like those website builders where you can choose from different templates and customize them to your liking.
Exactly. But these platforms are becoming increasingly sophisticated,
Oh, wow.
allowing you to build more complex applications without needing deep coding expertise.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. So even if a product manager decides not to pursue full-fledged coding skills, they can still get hands-on experience with building things.
Right, which can be a great way to bridge that gap between product vision and technical implementation.
Absolutely. And who knows, you might even discover a hidden talent for building cool stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, maybe I'll be the next Mark Zuckerberg.
You never know. Now, I have to admit, I'm a bit of a visual learner. Are there any tools or resources out there that can help me visualize these technical concepts?
Absolutely. There are tons of great online resources that use interactive diagrams and visualizations to explain things like system architecture, data structures, and algorithms.
Oh, wow, that sounds right up my alley.
And some of them even gamify the learning process, which can make it more fun and engaging.
Okay, yeah, I'm all about making learning fun and accessible.
And remember, the goal of technical literacy isn't to become a developer.
Right.
It's to gain enough understanding to have informed conversations, make strategic decisions, and collaborate effectively with your technical team.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where we can confidently navigate the technical landscape without getting lost in the weeds.
Exactly. And it's a journey, not a destination.
I love that. Okay, I'm feeling much more empowered now.
Yeah.
It's not about coding or no coding. It's about finding the right level of technical literacy for our individual roles and goals.
Exactly. And it's an ongoing process of learning and growth.
So even if we're not all destined to be coding wizards, we can still equip ourselves with the knowledge and skills we need to thrive as product leaders in this ever-evolving tech world.
Well said. It's all about finding what works best for you and your career path.
You know, as we've been unpacking this whole to code or not to code debate, I keep thinking back to the source of our deep dive today.
Yeah, the Algo Academy blog post.
It's kind of ironic, right?
It is, in a way.
You'd think a company whose whole business is built around teaching people to code
Right.
would be all about pushing everyone to become coding ninjas.
You'd think so.
But they actually acknowledge that it's not a one-size-fits-all answer.
And they do a great job of presenting both sides of the argument.
I think what I appreciate most is how they emphasize the importance of context.
Definitely.
They're not saying coding is good or coding is bad.
Right.
It's more nuanced than that.
It's about recognizing that the right decision depends on your specific role, your team's dynamics, the product you're building, and even your own personal goals.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's really the key takeaway for anyone listening. Right? There's no magic formula.
Nope.
It's about weighing the pros and cons.
Right.
Understanding the trade-offs, and ultimately making the choice that aligns with your individual circumstances.
I like that. You know, even if you decide that becoming a coding whiz isn't for you, this whole discussion about technical literacy has been eye-opening, for me at least.
I agree.
It really highlights the importance of bridging that gap between the what of the product and the how it comes to life.
Exactly.
So whether you're a coding enthusiast or just code curious, having that solid technical foundation can make you a more effective product manager.
Absolutely. It's about speaking the language, understanding the landscape, and ultimately building better products.
And building those better products by collaborating more effectively with your technical team.
Exactly. It all comes back to collaboration and communication.
Well said.
Well,
on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of coding for product managers. I think so, too.
hopefully you're walking away with a clearer sense of the possibilities and a few actionable steps to level up your technical game.
And as always, we encourage you to keep exploring, experimenting, and finding the path that best suits your journey as a product leader in this crazy world of tech.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. So, as we've been going through all of this, should I learn to code? Should I not learn to code? It just makes me think back to where we started today.
Yeah, that Algo Academy article.
It's kind of funny, right?
It is a little ironic.
You'd think a company that, their whole business is teaching people how to code.
Right.
They'd just be like, learn to code. Everybody learn to code.
Yeah, it's the best thing ever.
But they actually admit that it's not so simple.
They don't push it on everybody, which I thought was really refreshing.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That they presented both sides.
And really what I like the most about it is how they, emphasized that it really depends.
Context matters.
Yeah, context matters so much.
They weren't saying coding's good or coding's bad.
Yeah, there are so many factors.
It depends, right?
Uh-huh.
Like what your role is, what your team's like, what you're building, what you want to do in the future even.
Exactly. And I think that's, the biggest takeaway for everybody listening.
Yeah, I agree.
There's no magic answer.
Right.
There's no right answer for everything.
You got to weigh the pros and cons. You got to think about what makes sense for you. Understand those trade-offs and make the choice that really works for your situation.
100%.
And even if you decide, you know what, coding, not for me.
Yeah.
I still think this whole conversation about technical literacy has been so valuable.
Oh, absolutely.
It's really about understanding how we bridge that gap.
Between the what and the how.
Yeah, the what of the product and then the how of actually making it happen.
Yeah, how do we actually build this thing?
So whether you are like a coding enthusiast or if you're just a little curious about it.
Having that solid, technical foundation can make you a much stronger product manager.
For sure, yeah. You can speak the language, you understand the landscape, and ultimately, you build better products.
And we build those better products because we work better with our teams.
Exactly. We can collaborate better, we can communicate better.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive for today.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of ground.
I hope you're walking away feeling a little more, I don't know, maybe a little more clear about what's possible, maybe with a few ideas you can actually use to, level up your own skills.
And as always, we want to encourage you to keep learning, keep experimenting, keep figuring out what works best for you in this world of tech because it's always changing.
That is so true. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.